Hey, so any of you folks that are considering 3D printers and maybe why they're helpful in the hobby, I'm going to just give you a small use case. I actually use them. I've been using 3D printers for years, and I've learned 3D design. Nothing too fancy, but certainly enough to meet my needs. So my friend Victor recently posted on the EDF Jet Clubhouse that he needed this hatch right here. This hatch here is the battery hatch that comes off the plane. This piece is actually glued and it's part of the fuselage, so you can't buy it as a separate part because it's not technically considered a separate part. I think he crashed from some of his other pictures, and this came loose because I'm guessing the battery was in there and it popped it out and broke it. So he was asking if anybody had one of these. Now I actually have one of these SR71s, and my hatch, or this cover, is in place, it's glued. So I had one to measure from. So I actually used the battery hatch, which is removable, to take my measurements, because this is all parallel. So it's all pretty much the same size. So I could take some of my measurements for the holes and that sort of thing. And then I kind of went over to the plane and just confirmed everything. Now, what was tricky about this, I use a software called Tinkercad for most of my designs, for things such as, you know, I make receiver mounts, I make battery mounts, I make mounts for different things. I make all kinds of different parts in Tinkercad. Tinkercad I found to be by far the easiest 3D CAD software. You know, maybe someday I'll do a quick sort of tutorial on hobby use. Lots of videos on how to use Tinkercad, but Tinkercad's unique because you start with like objects, you know, like a block, and then you define dimensions, and then you lay things on it. So it's sort of additive, or you can create holes and things, and you know, it looks very simple, but you can create some amazingly complex things in Tinkercad. The problem I had for this design was this curve right here. So this curve is very distinct to the aircraft, and Tinkercad does not have a feature where you can create a unique curve. You can create like one of these and kind of manipulate the scale of it. But as you can see, it's always going to have sort of this perfect round because it's based on a circle. And it's not going to have this like very unique bow. So I had to do something kind of different for this use case. I used software called Onshape. And what I did was, you can actually see on this piece of paper, I took that hatch and I laid it vertically down, and I just drew a line against the hatch to trace that curve. And then I drew two tick marks that were exactly 90 millimeters apart. And then I took a picture with those two tick marks right at the edge of my frame. And what that allowed me to do is insert this photo into Onshape and scale it so that I knew this should be 90 millimeters. So when I set this to 90 millimeters, it would give me something to trace. And so this is kind of the finished drawing, but basically I manipulate the picture so that that curve, that line was this right here. And I traced half of it using a tool on Onshape, which is free to use for hobbyists. And then I mirrored it over here to make sure it's perpendicular. Then I duplicated it and moved it up the thickness 1.7 millimeters. And I created two lines on each end. So really not a lot of work. And then from there you extrude it. So right now I'm looking at it face on, but if I rotate it, you can see I extruded it. So I did add, I mean, I'm simplifying things. I added some lines. When I did all this work, I made sure I knew that from here to here was exactly 46 millimeters. That kind of helped me draw the lines and make sure that they were all the right size, because the width of the hatch is 46 millimeters. And then when I extruded it, I said 80 millimeters. So what that did is that gave me this sort of 3D object that's just the basic hatch, but it has that unique curve. Now from there, I could export it into Tinkercad. because for me, Tinkercad's just much faster to work in. And so the next thing I did was I added all the little holes, so you can just see where you just create these like hole blocks, and I made them. You can see on this paper. I mean, it's kind of messy, but it's 80 millimeters by 46 millimeters, and I measured that the first set of holes are 10 millimeters from this edge, and then there's 8 millimeters in between them after that. And then each one is 16 millimeters by 3¼ millimeters. And they're inset 10 millimeters on each side. And then 4 separates and then 6 in the center roughly. So I created a row and then duplicated it. And then when you duplicate in Tinkercad, it will actually just, it like duplicates there. And then when I hit duplicate to these ones, it'll stick them right there because it kind of assumes you're doing what you're doing. So that will then, when I merge everything, that will create the holes. And then underneath, you can kind of see, it's a little hard, but so you can ignore, these are the holes poking through, but you can see, so there's these 2 ridges, and that's what that battery hatch kind of slots into, plus it gives this some rigidity. And then this part, unlike the hatch, which is just this piece, the part that glues in has these little flanges on the sides. So I measured those, the depth, 6 millimeters, and they're about 1 millimeter wide. And they're like 2½ millimeters inset. So I kind of measured these parts. Again, I started with like one of those big blocks like I showed you, and I just changed the dimensions to this. And then, there's all these tools in this program where you can, when you have an object selected, you can center it and do all these different things. It takes a little bit of a learning curve, but not bad. So basically, once you get it all laid out like this, then you select everything, and then you merge it. So it's called grouping. So I'm just clicking a button, boom, and then it kind of takes all those objects and makes one object. See? So this is the hatch that he's looking for, and it has that right curve because I was able to replicate that in Onshape. And then everything else I just added in Tinkercad. The Tinkercad part of this took me about 20 minutes. The Onshape part took me a while because I've actually never used that tool. So from here I export it, and then I bring it into my, let's see, I can probably open it here. Yeah, so this was the downloaded file. When I open that, it's going to open in Bamboo Studios because I'm using a Bamboo Labs printer. And yeah, so you can kind of see the hatch. Now I print it I'm just picking a face to sort of move it. I print these this way with a brim. That way that it doesn't need supports or anything weird, and I find it prints much cleaner. So I print something called a brim, which helps it stick. So it kind of creates this little platform that it prints it on, and that way it doesn't fall off or fall over or get all messed up. And then from here, I send it to my printer, which is sitting over here. This is, I have a lot of printers, but this is my newest and favorite. This is the Bamboo Labs P1S. And yeah, it just prints so fast. Took ½ hour to print. I printed it in ABS. I have their automated materials system, the AMS. So I have ABS, I have 2 different colors of ABS, and I have a PLA Plus spool, and I don't have anything in the 4th slot right now, but that actually lets me automatically switch between materials. You can do multicolor. I use it for different material types typically, so I'm not fiddling with spools, because this has dehumidifier stuff in it, silica, so you can leave these in here and they'll stay. So yeah, basically, this is it. I printed it. The first version, it needed a little tiny bit of tweaking, about a ½ millimeter of adjustment on a couple parts. The first one fit, but the fitment could have been better. So I made adjustments, printed a second one, and it was absolutely perfect. So I popped that in the mail to Victor earlier. Yeah, but just a really small, sort of fun example of things you can do with a 3D printer. Again, you can't even buy this part. It doesn't exist. It's part of the fuselage. But, you know, I printed, you know, luckily the SR-71's black, so it didn't need paint. I just printed it in black ABS and good to go. So used a couple different tools. Tinkercad's totally free to use. Onshape, they have a hobbyist version that's totally free and it's fully functional. So, I mean, none of these tools cost you anything. Obviously, the printers, you know, can be expensive or cheap. I mean, you can get a very inexpensive Creality printer that's halfway decent for $100 these days. So, yeah, I mean, I find 3D printing to be a huge help in the hobby. And like I said, once, I mean, you can go to Thingiverse, you can go to different places, download all kinds of nifty stuff people have already designed. But once you learn how to do that, and it's not that hard, you know, you can really start to have fun. You know, I love seeing people post, you know, Morgan's 3D and there's a bunch of different guys. You know, I usually comment on some of their posts because I guess I consider them kind of fellow 3D creators. I love that they create, you know, objects and sell them. And I think it's a great little cottage industry. I don't generally buy any of that because I can just make my own. And I have kind of my own thoughts on how I design things. So it's cool to be able to do it yourself. Because then anytime the use case pops up, you know, you can make whatever you want. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting. People might, you know, find sort of a little behind the scenes information about how all this works. I know I did it quickly, but trying to avoid having a super long video. Anyway, feel free to ask questions. Thanks, guys.